I'm the Whelan Carbon Code's Communications Officer. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today for our Small Projects webinar. We're going to have a presentation from Dr. Vicky West on small projects and how they can get involved with the Whelan Carbon Code. And then towards the end of our session, we'll open it out for your questions and have a bit of a discussion. And my colleague Alice Peace will be leading the question and answer session today. I'd like to let you know that the webinar will be recorded and we'll make it available after the session. So that will be available on our website, and it will also be available through our newsletter for anyone who wasn't able to attend, or if you'd like to watch back at your own pace. So without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker today, Dr. Vicky West. So Dr. Vicky West is the Whelan Carbon Code's Senior Development Manager. She's got a background in climate science and forestry policy, and she's played a vital role in the development of the code and has overseen the management of it since it was launched back in 2011. Vicky brings a wealth of knowledge and experience about the code, so I'm sure her presentation today will be a fascinating insight into small woodland creation projects. And yeah, now we'll just get started with the webinar, so I'll hand over to you, Vicky. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. So today we wanted to just talk a little bit about small projects and how they can be involved in the Whelan Carbon Code to generate carbon credits. So I'm going to talk through what we mean by a small project and then think about the eligibility and how you apply, how you register, validate and verify your small project, and just talk about how the process differs for small projects to standard projects and how we make it simpler. I'll also talk a little bit about how you can group projects for validation and verification, which saves money during that process. And then I guess pose some questions to you. So we're thinking about how we improve the sort of streamlined version of the code for small projects and had some ideas how we might do that. It would be great to hear whether you think they would make things better or not. Let's get started. So the first question is, what is a small project? So within the Whelan Carbon Code, we currently define a small project as something which is 5 hectares net planted area or less. And then I guess we need to think, well, what can you have in that 5 hectares? So it is possible to combine different compartments. If you've planted very small compartments, you can combine them into one project. So in terms of what you can combine, the kind of smallest unit of woodland that you can have needs to be 0.1 hectares and it needs to be at least 10 meters wide. And for the purposes of the small woods calculator, it needs to be 3.5 meter spacing or less, so that you have at least 816 stems per hectare. If you are doing a standard project, you can do wider spacings, but within the small woods calculator, the number of scenarios you can do is more limited. So at the moment it has to be 3.5 meter spacing. Within one project, you can combine up to 5 years of planting. So if you planted a small area one year and another area the next year, you can combine them into one project. And the other thing to bear in mind is that it has to be within one project, it has to be a contiguous land ownership. And if it's not contiguous, if it's not all in one place, it needs to be the same ownership, the same manager and the same management plan. So if you own 2 areas of land and there's a part in the middle that's owned by somebody else, you could still potentially put those 2 areas into one project. So that's kind of what we're defining as a small project. Then I wanted to talk a bit about the eligibility, and this is essentially the same as with standard sized projects. So the things you need to remember is that you need to register before work begins on site. Your site can't have been wooded in the last 25 years. It still needs to be a permanent land use change. You need an EIA for woodland creation where that applies. So for depending on what country you're in and what type of woodland, the threshold is different, but you need to look at the rules for that. You need to meet the UK forestry standard, and your project needs to be additional, the same as for standard projects. So you need to show that there's no legal requirement for the woodland, and you need to still complete our Woodland Carbon Code cash flow to show that the project is financially additional. So the next thing, I just wanted to think through the whole validation and verification process that projects follow. So as a reminder, we've said you have to register before work begins on site. You then need to validate your project within 3 years. And then at year 5 and every 15 years, you have to verify the project to show how much carbon is being sequestered. But there are some differences for small projects which make it a bit easier. So I just wanted to highlight those as we go through the process. So for registration, the general rule for registration is that you need to show a map and a carbon calculation. The one thing that's different for small projects is that we have a simplified carbon calculator. So if you look at the small woods tab, there's a much reduced amount of information you need to put in to be able to do your carbon calculation. So this is a snapshot from the small woods calculator. So basically, you need to know the area of your project, and you need to know the area that is broadleaf or conifer, thinned or no thin. And you need to know just something about the soil type and the type of ground preparation that you're going to be doing. But you put in those limited inputs and it comes up with a prediction of the carbon your project will sequester. There are a couple of limits to who can use this small calculator. So as I said before, it needs to be 3.5 meter spacing. It can't be wider than that. In terms of the management types, it could be minimum intervention, thinned or CCF, but it doesn't include clear fell projects at the moment. And the simplified carbon calculator is very conservative. So it uses what is known as yield class 4 for broadleaves and yield class 12 for conifers. So that means we give you a conservative number of PIUs up front, but I'll show you later what happens with verification and the savings you can make in the monitoring because of this conservative prediction. The other thing is that we might ask for the species information, but it doesn't drive the calculator. So this is all you need to make the calculator work and give you a carbon figure. So the next thing is validation. So we've got the simplified carbon calculator at registration. At validation, you also need to do your project design document and you need to fill in the cash flow. So there's a couple of bits in the project design document that you don't need to fill in if you're a small project, so that saves you a bit of time. And in the cash flow, you have to fill in the same information about your costs and income, but some of the rates are better for small projects. So the rates for planning surveys and fencing and ongoing management are higher for the small projects. But other than that, it's similar to the normal process and you would validate as normal. Where some of the savings come for small projects is more with the verification. So at year 5, you would do the same stocking density survey as a standard project, but you might have, well, you're going to have fewer strata or fewer plots, so the survey work won't take as long to carry out just because you'll have a fewer number of plots. And we might still issue corrective actions if there were problems at this time, and we would convert units if your project was doing okay. So the year 5 is fairly similar, but once we get to year 15, there's various options that will save you some time. So at year 15 for small projects, we have a different process for doing the monitoring. So in a standard process, you'd have to go and do a mensuration survey and you'd have to measure the DBH, the diameter at breast height and the height of your trees. But for small projects, we're saying, okay, you don't need to do all that survey work. What we do need, though, is some visual information that shows that the woodland is doing okay, that it's healthy, that it's there. So we would need 3 or 4 site-based photos from somebody having visited the site on the ground. And we'd need some kind of aerial image like the one on the slide, either from aerial photography or satellite data or drone image or video. Some of those we have available through our systems and might be able to help you with. Some of those you could get from the latest Google Maps or other mapping software where they have aerial photography available. So as long as you can provide these photos instead of doing the survey work to show that the site looks healthy from on site and you can see from above that it's looking good, and you complete the progress report as normal, what we would do for the small woods is we will convert your units and we'll just convert 1 to 1. So we won't look at whether you've done better than expected or worse than expected. We'll just say if it looks like it's doing okay, we'll convert 100% of your PIUs to WCUs. So that will save quite a lot of time because you don't have to go out and do the survey work. You just need to find these images. The one thing that I do bear in mind is I've said that we will convert the units 1 to 1 on the basis of these images, but you always have the option with the small woods work to actually say, okay, at a given verification, if I know that my project's doing really well and I'm sure it's doing much better than predicted, I can actually do the mensuration survey like a standard project, and I can show that it's doing better, that there's 100 extra carbon units or something. And then you would be able to claim those extra units on the basis of doing a verification with a mensuration survey. But we're not requiring you to do that. It's just if you know your project's doing well, you have the option. And then another way that you could potentially save some money on the actual verification in terms of actually paying the verifier is that we've set up the option for a self-assessment version. So I guess once you've done your survey work, you have a choice from year 15 that either you pay a verifier as normal to do your third-party check, in which case we'll convert the units from pending issuance units to woodland carbon units, just like we do with a standard project. Or you could say, okay, I'm going to self-assess my project. So you'll produce your images and you'll produce your progress report and upload it to the registry, but you won't need to go through the third-party verifier. So you won't need to pay the verification cost. So the benefit obviously is that that's way cheaper. The compromise for that is that we won't convert the units. They'll just stay as pending issuance units until we do a proper verification where something is third-party checked. And in terms of the self-assessment, there are some conditions. So it's from year 15. You can do it every other time. So it saves you 50% of the verification fees. And it can't be your last vintage. So on the last one, we do require that you actually do a mensuration survey and show us how much carbon has been sequestered. And there has to have been no major changes to your project. So that's what we're suggesting for self-assessment. Again, that obviously saves you the money of the verification, the compromise being that we don't convert your units until you actually do the third-party check. And then another option in terms of saving money is that it's possible to group projects together to go through the validation and verification process. So you can group together, or a project manager can group together up to 50 hectares worth of small projects and 15 standard size projects. They can be any location across the UK. Again, within the group, the planting can span up to 5 planting years. And the group manager needs to provide 1 project design document or project progress report. And what you get out the end is one validation or verification statement for the whole group. Normally within a group, we still issue the credits to each project within a group though. But that gives you cost savings on your validation and verification. And just to give you an example, so this shows the cost of a single project being validated or verified, and then the cost of a project within a group when it's validated and verified. So whilst the single project validation is £1,000 to £2,000 at the moment, within a group, the cost per project could be as low as £300. So it depends which validator, it depends the size of the group, and it depends the type of project. But there is potentially a big saving to be made there where projects are grouped. Just to say that the issuance and conversion fees are the same as for standard projects, so there's no difference there. But obviously with a small project, you're issuing many fewer units, so the cost of the unit issuance isn't significant. We're aware that the kind of the threshold for a project being viable for the Woodland Carbon Code is increasing at the moment because of some of the increased costs in woodland creation and in validating and verifying your project. So we've been thinking how we can make the process easier. So these are some ideas from us in terms of how we might make it easier. None of this is guaranteed yet. This is just thinking through what we might be able to do. But we would really appreciate your feedback in terms of whether these would make a significant difference in terms of making the Woodland Carbon Code more accessible for smaller projects. So just to talk through them briefly, we have a list of project developers on our website, and one of the challenges sometimes for somebody with a small project is, well, if I want to group it, how do I know, who can help me group my project so that I can benefit from the cheaper validation and verification fees? So one thing we could do is on our website, we could highlight the project developers that specialize in grouping small projects, just to give you that signposting. There's the potential that we could increase the threshold from 5 hectares. I guess from a standard point of view, we need to look at the risk and benefit of that in terms of the benefit to the projects and the risk, because we have this simplified methodology, and looking at the number of small projects and the proportion of the carbon they make up in the whole scheme. We could potentially simplify the mapping requirements so that it's less complex to provide us with a map of your project. Potentially the additionality, we could have a kind of streamlined version of the additionality for smaller projects. I'm aware that within some of the grant schemes in each country, sometimes there's a grant available for landowners who work together. So potentially there's a way that through those grant schemes that we might be able to provide funding for a group manager to bring small projects together. That would require us to talk to the grant teams to see what options there are there, but it's something we could look at. And potentially we could help improve access to drone or satellite data for verifying small projects, potentially through a system where you can access that, or bringing that data together. And then another thing to think about is how the credits are issued. So until now, we've issued the credits to each project within the group, and we always had the option that people could issue the credits at the group level. And if you issue the credits at the group level, then you only need to survey at the group level to prove how much carbon is there, rather than to prove how much is in each individual project, so that it would be less work in the survey work. And then the other thing to think about is whether we whether and how we pool that risk and reward across small owners, if potentially there's a local cluster group that's willing to work together. We have a project at the moment that is looking at contracts between buyers and sellers and setting out the terms that people need to be aware of. And potentially with improved contracts in place, it might make it easier for people to understand the risk and the benefits of working together in a project. So that's some of our ideas about how we might make things easier. And that's all I was going to present on for today. I see there's been a few questions in the chat, and Alice has posted these suggestions in the chat. So if you think any of these would be a significant improvements for small projects to make things easier, please give them a thumbs up to give us an idea of what you think would benefit small projects. And equally, if you have any other ideas of things that would make it easier for small projects, please do either put your hand up or put them in the chat and let us know, because it would be great to have your ideas as well as we think about reviewing this process. So that's all for me from now. Alice, are there some questions to answer? Or
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if hands up works, so if anyone has any more questions, then please keep them coming in the chat. So the first question was from Eddie, asking when will drones be used for measuring carbon? Thinking the current methodology of measurement is crude, and just I guess wondering when we're going to introduce, or if we're planning to introduce any drone measurements in the future.
Yeah, sure. So we've been trialing drones in terms of how they collect visible spectrum data and how they collect LiDAR data, to look at how we can use them or how we can incorporate their use in the Woodland Carbon Code for the monitoring. We're not quite there yet in terms of incorporating it, but if you do want to try it, do let us know, because we're kind of collecting all the trials that are going on so that we can then come up with our best kind of advice and guidance on how we allow that to be implemented in future. We have a project with Scottish Government under the CivTech programme at the moment. So it's a bit like, if you're in England and Wales, it's a bit like Innovate UK. It's a programme to fund, a Scottish Government programme to fund innovation. And through that, we will be looking at how we use drone, satellite, other remote sense data, and how we incorporate that in the Woodland Carbon Code in the best way.
Well, thank you very much for that, Vicky. Eddie's just following up, asking what's the other places such as CSX Carbon, Oxford University already collecting data using drones, and wondering what's kind of blocking us from doing that.
I guess there's nothing blocking us, and I'm aware that there's various people that are collecting data using drones. I guess to be able to roll it out across the UK and be confident in the result and confident that that process is simple enough for everybody to use, then we just need to get all those building blocks in place. So hopefully over the next couple of years, we will get that sorted and work out how we can feed that data into the validation and verification process.
Awesome, thanks for that, Vicky. Another question from Jonathan, asking about groups. What happens if another project in the group fails to be validated or verified, or requires remedial action? And will an individual's validation or verification be delayed? And can you join or leave a group at any time in the future?
Okay, so the first part of the question about what happens if one project isn't verified. So within a group, well, take a step back. At the moment, projects, when they're verified, get a status of red, amber, green, a kind of traffic light symbol, which says whether the project is on track, there is some concern or lots of concern. So within a group, if your carbon is still measured on each project, then there wouldn't be any delay, but different projects in the group might have a different rating. So that's how we would deal with that. And then the other question about can you leave or join a group? Ideally, we would like groups to stay together with the same project manager, but we recognize that groups change or project managers change. And so whilst you might do one verification in a given group, it is possible to leave that group and join a different one, provided all the criteria are still met about timings and things. So ideally, in terms of when your credits are due to be verified, they all need to be due to be verified about the same time, so that we're looking at projects about the same age. So sort of using that 5-year, everything needs to be within a 5-year planting window rule still. So yes, you can change, but there's some limit on how flexible it can be.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Vicky. Had a few more questions coming through. A question from Joel asking about sites not being previously wooded and how is that defined? They have an inquiry about a site that had a reasonable amount of naturally generated Sitka from an adjacent site, but they want to clear that and then plant a diverse native species woodland, and they're asking if that will qualify under the Carbon Code.
So I guess there's two things to think about. One is if the woodland would regenerate without any intervention, then we need to think whether the woodland you create instead is additional, or whether the woodland would happen without our intervention. I guess that's one question. I probably need to look at the exact example.
Yeah, I've popped a link to our email address in the chat. So if anyone does have any questions about a specific project that they're looking at, then we can look into that specific project in more detail.
Cool. And then the other thing to consider, if you have a project where there is some biomass on the site already, is that you would have to account for the loss of that biomass before you account for the sequestration in the new biomass. And again, you would probably need to chat to us about that. There's a few projects have done that, for example, where they were changing from something that was a Christmas tree plantation to a woodland scenario, and we accounted for the loss in the kind of Christmas tree stock before we accounted for the sequestration in the woodland that replaced it.
Cool. Thanks for that, Vicky. And Joel, if you do have any questions about your project specifically, please reach out to us in the inbox and we can look into that for you in more detail. Question from Julie. We said at the start that as we said at the start, it has to be the same ownership and management plan. That's the one project. But we've described grouping projects up to 50 hectares for small projects. Essentially, Julie wants to know if she can look to group different projects from different owners.
Yes, of course. So a group can be, so within one project, it has to be the same owner, either contiguous or separate blocks under the same management plan. But within a group, you can group basically across the UK, you can group different owners. There is a group agreement at the moment that you have to sign, which is basically those in the group agreeing that they're going to do their validation and verification together. But you can group different owners, that's fine.
Thank you, Vicky. And one more question for now, at least, more might come in. Eddie would like to know, there have been some discussions about agroforestry added to the Woodland Carbon Code, and is this likely to be added in the future?
So there was a project under NERF in England that was looking at agroforestry last year, I think. And there's another follow-on project which is funded by Ferns, and that project is looking at more of a whole farm approach to carbon. So whether the farmer might look at agroforestry and forestry and hedgerows and potentially peatland restoration if there is some. and how those things might be validated together. In terms of agroforestry, what we found from the initial NERF work was that the number of carbon units that you can claim per hectare of agroforestry are quite small. So it's hard to make it viable in its own project. But if you had a landowner or someone was looking to do some woodland creation and agroforestry, there might be the potential to include them together and it would be viable. So we are looking at how we incorporate that into the Woodland Carbon Code, but I don't have a date at the moment. But certainly there's potential for that in future.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Vicky. That's all for questions at the moment. If anyone has any more questions, please pop them in the chat now, or alternatively, you can drop us an email. The email address is on the slide, but I've also popped it in the chat for copy paste if you do have any questions after the webinar.
Cool, thanks. And just to reiterate, if anybody has any ideas about what would make things easier for small projects to be involved in the Woodland Carbon Code, we'd really love to hear your thoughts. I'd suggested some on the previous slide. Alice had put them in the chat, but if there's anything else that you think would work, you know, please do let us know, because we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thanks Vicky, thanks Alice, and thank you for all of your questions, everybody. So yeah, that's the conclusion of our webinar today. I've just popped a quick poll into the chat there just to gauge how we did and how you found today's webinar. I hope you found it as informative as I did. Before we finish up, I'd just like to highlight that we will have another webinar coming up very soon, and that will be on Wednesday the 4th of December. That's on the topic of buying Woodland Carbon Code units and also peatland code units. So that will be a joint webinar with the peatland code team. You can sign up to that via our website. The details aren't quite there yet, so please do check back in a week or so and you can sign up there, or subscribe to our newsletter and you can see details there. But yeah, all that's left for me to do is to thank Vicky and thank Alice for their presentations and help with the question and answer session today. And thank you all for joining us for the webinar. That's great, everybody. Thanks just now. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.